And the narrative, you know, it's a lot worse than most people want to know. It's a lot worse than most people want to think. It's just all lies.
Dr. Tro, what was it that made you discard standard nutrition advice?
Yeah, Dave. First of all, awesome. Thanks for having me here. Um, you reach a lot of people, uh, and I'm happy to be here, chat with you. Uh, I I was, for lack of a better word, excuse me, I was fat and sick. That was it. I was fat and sick, uh, and it wasn't for not trying. It depends on how far you go back. I grew up in a household where everybody was obese, and I wanted to break free. And in fact, when I was 13, I was the current weight I am now. I was 207 pounds, and when uh, when I saw my doctor, he looked at me. He said, "You're going to be fat, just like your family." And I had sat in the doctor's office for about an hour and a half in the waiting room prior to that. And so I walked out of there like, who is this guy? Who does he think he is? And why the hell didn't he put a bike or a treadmill in his waiting room instead of a TV and some chairs if he really wanted me to lose weight? Right. So I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder, and that's when I wanted to become a doctor. And so, fast forward, I gained from that point 10 pounds a year until I was, through medical school, through college, through medical school, through uh, residency, and then internal medicine. And then I was chief resident. And at the end of it, I'm 350 pounds, uh, and it's not like I didn't have great doctors telling me to count calories and, you know, uh, people telling me just to eat less. I could memorize the calories. I had entire nutrition labels memorized. Before there was MyFitnessPal, there was Tro. You can ask him the calories of a banana. He'd tell you a medium size is 80 calories. An ounce of cheese is anywhere from 90 to 120, right? I mean, I could just recite the nutrition facts. Uh, and that's because I have like a near photographic memory with numbers, which proved well in medicine. Uh, so it wasn't for a lack of information or computing ability, or none of that had helped me. And it's very clear now it didn't help anybody else. Uh, you look at the obesity epidemic over the last 7 decades, and it's just blossomed. And calorie information is widespread now, uh, both on labels and apps. The app downloads are through the roof, and yet what's happening? There's not even a dent. So the idea of calories, I really started to question it. And when my wife challenged me to lose weight 10 years ago, a bit over 10 years ago, she said, very simply, you're a smart doctor. You're the chief resident, scored on the 90th percentile on your board exam, you know, and she's playing my arrogance. My wife knows how to work me, And she said, go figure it out. You figured this diagnosis out. You figured that diagnosis out. This family member had that. You figured it out. You looked at this guy and said he had this. Like, go figure it out. And so she really sort of honed my arrogance at the time to obesity. And so I was like, yeah, I can figure this out. I read everything, every diet book from every camp, all the nutrition guidelines, all the papers that support the guidelines. I read textbooks, 3 obesity textbooks. I became obesity medicine board certified. And that's when I started challenging the convention, because I read the data for myself. And when you go to literature and you read it for yourself, you'll see something very quick. It's not hard. It doesn't make sense, right? It's all a house of cards. It's all public policy gone wrong, right? Based off of faulty information. And it's tough as a layperson to understand that, but I'm a doctor. I have read the data myself. I had no skin in the game. I didn't want to, I had never cooked a steak up until that point. I didn't have a bias. I just was desperate for answers. So once you go into the literature, you begin to see how much is dogma and bias. And once you really look at all the data and understand what's going on, uh, and so when that, mm, that was the tipping point, and that came, it didn't come right away. About 1 year into my journey, I really started to see, right? But initially, I went to the literature. I was like, what diet does better? That's it. That's all I want to know. Show me the head-to-head studies, just like as if it was an antibiotic for pneumonia. Show me the head-to-head studies of this antibiotic versus antibiotic. Which which medication is going to work better for obesity? That was the way I looked at it. Is it me counting calories? Well, they had interventional studies looking at counting calories versus low fat. Low fat did better. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to count calories. Then you look more into the interventional data that compare low fat to low carb. Low carb does better. So it's like, all right, I'm not going to do low fat. That was the process. Where does the data take me? Because I need help. I'm fat and desperate. Every joint in my body hurts. I can't sleep. I don't feel rested. I have prediabetes. And you know what? Dr. Adis from when I was 13 was right. I am turning out to be like my family. And my wife on top of it is like, are you going to be around for your kids? So, legitimate question. Um, so that's my primordial ooze right there. That's when I started to question the narrative. And the narrative, you know, it's a lot worse than most people want to know. It's a lot worse than most people want to think. It's just all lies. You know.
Yeah. Oh, when you think of it, as you're describing it there, it feels a little bit like nutrition science is not actually science.
It is not so most of nutrition science is based on observational data or data based on questionnaires. And so you're absolutely right. It's not a science. Uh, it is largely good guesswork that could or could not be true. The hard science in nutrition is interventional studies, right? Compare one diet to the other, who does better, why. Um, so, yeah, you're absolutely right. There was not a hard science, but as a clinician, we turn to hard science. Like, just show me what's more effective in humans, right? Um, for the problem we're looking to address, right? So I'm not looking to address make believe environmental issues. I'm not looking to address make believe, animal welfare issues. I'm not looking to address, uh, the this idea that religious ideas that eating animal flesh is uh, these are all like biases, by the way, like that are in the medical literature. The Adventists have a ton of nutritional information that biases away from meat for religious reasons. There are tons of researchers who bias from away from meat and low carb diets because they're concerned about the climate. And then there's a ton of bias against in the nutrition literature because of this, uh, which I empathize with, but doesn't belong in nutrition, a care for animals and animal welfare. So these biases are so strong. And then there's a whole nother camp of bias in literature, which comes from, the corporate sponsored calories model. Uh, so these, once you start to untangle these biases, which is just so clear and easy once you read the literature, but it's hard. And it's tough to expect the average American to read, you know, countless books on obesity and thousands of papers to understand it. It's a huge ask. But start to ask basic questions. If calories are all that matter, does 1,000 calories of alcohol equal 1,000 calories of steak? Right? Do I feel the same after 1,000 calories of alcohol as I would if I had 1,000 calories of steak? And if the answer is no, 1,000 calories of alcohol feels different, and I wouldn't be exercising 12 hours later or the next day with 1,000 calories of alcohol, but I would with 1,000 calories of steak. I probably feel great. If it doesn't pass the sniff test, welcome to not needing to read thousands of studies. So just that's my advice. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's incredibly biased. That's what woke me up.
Mm. So for you, you reduced your weight and got healthier. Like, what? How many pounds did you lose?
Yeah, so I also, besides like my food composition issues, you have to understand I had serious issues with weight. I had tried a million times. Yeah, I had yo-yo dieted. Uh, I was just sort of disenfranchised, and I felt helpless. And I had a lot of learned helplessness, which is like, screw it. I might as well, I had a lot of all or none thinking where, so my food relationship wasn't great. Uh, so there was a lot of rebuilding that had to happen. But I lost 150 pounds um, in the course of 3 years. And, it wasn't clean the first year. I was binge eating chocolate after somebody coded in a hospital. So I'm like, okay, I got to go low carb. So I went to like low carb chocolate and clean protein bars, right? And then I focused on Greek yogurt and then I'm like, okay, I don't exactly need to abstain from eggs and meat, so let me introduce more of that into my diet. And in the second year, I started to try to reduce some of the artificial foods, and even if it was a crutch, I tried to just only use it when I really needed it. And by the time the third year got around, I went from eating like a protein bar a day or two protein bars a day to not, two protein bars a month, my third year. And honestly, in the last 5 years, I could count on my hand how many protein bars I've had. So yeah, that was 10 years ago. And in 3 years, I lost 150 pounds and I've kept it off. Um, so and it wasn't always easy. I had issues along the way that made it harder. I had a spinal surgery that sidelined me, and I love to exercise. I always love to exercise. So that sidelined me, and it took time to adjust and figure that out. And then I had a lower back injury. Uh, so it took time to adjust and figure that out. But I've been able to keep it off, and I'm the weight I was when I was, you know, 13 years old. So uh, super proud about that. Um,
I
yeah.
I guess your journey probably gives you a lot of empathy when you're talking to your patients.
Yeah. 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 That was another transition that's hard to like encapsulate for a person. So it's hard to understand, most of medicine is go memorize this. Here's $500,000 of debt. And then once you get like, there's a hierarchy in the training. It's like a very much an apprenticeship. So when you're starting as a medical student, you're like the lowest on the totem pole. And then you're an intern, and then you're a resident, and then you're a chief resident. And it's like you have to do what the people say above you. I mean, otherwise your career is jeopardized, right? So if you are too counterculture, they can just kick you out. If you don't work hard enough, they can just kick you out. And that's a huge, imagine going through med school, saddling yourself with debt, and then now you're not going to jeopardize that. So there's this culture in medicine, which is like it breeds an authoritarian, like it's a very authoritarian system, and it breeds out people who don't do what they're told, right? And so
Almost sounds like the military in a way.
it's worse than military, right? Because you have $500,000 of debt on you, right? So, and then, well, here's the thing: out of the military, you're just out, right? You can then psychologically heal, but when you come out of medicine, you have to accept a system. You have to accept a system where the insurance company is now your employer, not your patients, right? Your insurance company is cutting the checks. So it's not a healthy if you don't know what's going on beforehand. I mean, you can very easily get lost. Um, so to come back, your question was empathy. I had to drop all of that to really empathize with somebody, to really listen. You had to understand that the insurance model that promotes 7-minute visits needs to die. You have to understand that, you have to dismantle the fact that you have $500,000 of debt and your objective is not what gets you paid, but the patient's health, right? And you have to drop the fact that a lot of what you've been taught, some of it could be just paternalism gone wrong, or authoritarianism gone wrong, I should say. um so so I think really empathizing with somebody is like breaking free of those things. Then those are just the external things. Forget about the internal things. Like, I worked my whole life to become a doctor, ever since I was 13, and I'm super smart and I know best, right? um So like then there's a whole bunch of internal stuff it takes to dismantle to really empathize with a patient. So yeah, yes, now I'm at a place where, I have the utmost empathy. I listen. I even if I can't, if I haven't seen something before, I don't quite understand it. I'm not jumping to say this person's this person's making it up, or this person's just anxious. I'm like, what if I don't know something? What if I missed something? What am I missing? Right? And even if it is a bit of anxiety, how can I help that person's anxiety and see what happens to these symptoms? Right? So it's not this like, oh, it's just a placebo effect. The statins are completely fine, go take your statin. The muscle aches you're feeling are in your head. Right? It's not that. It's like, let's figure this out together. Let's, I don't know everything, but I do know, 10 to 20% may get, bad muscle aches. It's depleting CoQ10, it's depleting K2. Let's replete those. Maybe let's consider another thing. Let's try another way. Let's add back carbohydrates, see what happens to your cholesterol. Let's, you know, so to be empathetic, I mean, I think you meant about weight issues, which I 100% am, but I had to learn to be empathetic, and it didn't come from anything I was taught. It literally came from dismantling what I was taught, which again, this is very hard for average, like just somebody. It's just words coming out of my mouth, but like I hope it paints a picture of what it took, because it took a lot.
It does seem that there would be a lot of, because you're basically being trained to, like, almost kind of switch off, because it's 7-minute visit. It's just, patient in, patient out, just get through the numbers. And like, so it's almost, you're having to go 180 degrees the opposite way to actually start understanding the patients, right?
I mean, you nailed it, right? It's nearly, I cannot tell you, it's like a matrix, right? I do not sympathize people who are stuck right now. And I know a lot of people who are beginning to wake up, and they message me, and they message me all throughout the pandemic and even prior to that, like, how do I get out of this? And they're burnt. The rate of burnout is incredible in this profession, in the medical profession, nurses, PAs, doctors, NPs, um, because they feel it and they don't understand it. They feel the loss of their soul, so to speak. They feel the loss of, like, they know they're not helping people. They see it every day, and they want out. This isn't what they probably went into this to be a healer, right? They probably went into this with a cause, and they haven't found a way to break through the system. Um,
Yeah, I can't imagine that anyone's going into it thinking, I want a career where I can see as many patients as quickly as possible. Like,
yeah,
they do go into it just wanting to help, right?
yeah, and I think they end up just saying, "Well, this, like, the mentally speaking, well, this is the way it is. This is the way everybody else is doing it, and these drugs help, so no problems. At least I got them the drugs, and patients gonna take the drugs, and this is the work that needs to be done. So, and this is as much time as I can give right now. Book another visit. You know, like, that's There's a lot of this, just uh, explaining away instead of facing reality, which is the entire population is metabolically unwell. 90%. 70% are diabetic or pre-diabetic, 50% are hypertensive or pre-hypertensive, right? We are, 40% of people in our lifetime will have cancer. You are failing. Your profession has failed. You are failing. Wake the Because people are suffering, and that's that's my message now. That's how I feel. Excuse my language, Dave. Sorry if
No,
YouTube gives you the policy violation or whatever. You know, have
no,
they censored you yet? Because I've been censored. So
no, that not yet, but,
yeah, maybe
I'm
now.
sure they'll get me at some point. Realizing that that's what the system is, you kind of you discarded that. You said, "Okay, well, I'm not gonna work with the insurance companies anymore," and you just opened your own practice, which is kind of direct to patient practice.
Yeah. So I needed to get out. Right. I lost weight. I had to disregard everything I've been taught. I started publishing studies, and I had to get out. Um, and Yeah, I have not accepted any payments from pharmaceutical companies ever. I have not accepted any payments from insurance companies ever. Any contracts? There's no contracts. Um, and The reason why is I want to ensure that the patient is getting the service that they want, right? That they know what it is that they want. Their medical goals are clear to them, and they know that I'm helping them attain them. And the minute I'm not helping them attain their medical goals, they can just walk away, right? So, so we have a direct to patient model. That's one segment of our business, I guess. And then the other segment is direct to employer. So after we had such success with the direct to patient model, leveraging remote monitoring. So keep in mind, when you sign up with my medical practice, it's different. You're not stepping into an office. The office comes to your doorstep. You're getting a scale, a blood pressure cuff, a continuous glucose meter, a ketone meter, sleep studies, Holter monitors, genetic testing, blood work, all that come to your home, literally in a package. You don't do anything. You don't do it. You get a bunch of equipment. When you decide to use them, we see that data. When you step on the scale, we know how much water weight you have, how much fat mass, how much lean mass, what your visceral fat is. When you use a blood pressure cuff, we know your blood pressure, your heart rate variability, your um, you know, we when you're using, your CGM, the we see those fluctuations. We see what it looks like when you get poor sleep. We see what it looks like. We're tracking, alongside your activity meter, we're tracking that, right? So, we're sending, it's a medical office in your home, right? Which is a very unique concept. And we're nationwide. So you can be anywhere in the United States and get care. So that's our practice. And that was so effective. Um, when we published our data, employers started to pay attention, right? They started to look to see what's going on there. And they asked us, can you help our sickest? And so we started with several employers where we manage their patients with diabetes, where we manage their patients with obesity or hypertension, and it's completely voluntary. The employer offers this perk if you want an amazing remote practice, technology enhanced practice, you get that. And so we've helped those employees on average lose 15% of their weight, which is about 45 pounds at 2 years. And now the employers want us to keep going. So we've expanded. And why is that, right? They want happy, healthy employees that spend less, right? Spend less on drugs, that are their most efficient selves at work, their most healthy selves at work. And so now we have, five employers that we work with, along with, just individuals. And then the third arm is we have an app. So a lot of our education that we're providing, we put it into an app, in a way that, one of the most likely predictors of weight loss maintenance is if somebody in your home, a friend, somebody is doing it along with you. So we said, why are patients just suffering alone in silos? Why can't we get people together in a community? So we have now a community on our app of 13,000 people and growing. Um, and on the app, we have like full courses on CACs and cholesterol, on uh, sleep, on CGMs and how to use them, on diabetes, and we have a free introductory to low carb course where anybody can just go to a live course with health coaches and doctors and ask questions. We have challenges. We're basically giving those away to other doctors. We're like, look, you don't need to do what we've done. You can be a doctor, you can sign up to be in our network, and for a ridiculously low amount of money. I mean, like, we're giving it away to them, um, so that they can, put 200 of their patients right into an app and know that they're going to get resources and good information and just live interaction. It's not like, go do this on your own. I want to make sure there's a sort of a healthcare team that's walking them through. So that's the practice. It's really awesome. And we have Dr. Laura Buchanan, our health coaches, Amy Igis, Brian Wiley, Vic Basmagian, Tia Reed are just awesome. They've all gone through health journeys themselves. Uh, it's like a true metabolic health team, which is, we have the best. I have the best job. I really have the best job. It's not easy, but we need help and we need support. So go download the app. Go, you know, if you like it, like, tell a friend. Uh, but if you need expert medical care, we have docs in, you know 48 states. So it's not been easy, but we've done okay, and we have more to come. So that's the practice.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's rewarding. I mean, I imagine it must be so obviously hard work, but so rewarding because you're actually seeing people that are getting better. It's not just like, oh, okay, what drug am I going to give you this week? It's like, wow, you're doing so much better than than when I saw you last month, and your diabetes is almost gone, or something like that, right?
It's very rewarding. It also has its hardships, you know, where you see somebody go through a death in the family, or uh, have intense financial issues, and and like they sort of revert back, and so you also experience pain when there's a so you can't have it both ways, right? If you're gonna succeed with the wins, then you're gonna have sadness with the step backs. Uh, so it cuts both ways. Yes, we're ecstatic when people come off their diabetes medications. We ring a bell, you know. But we also have hardships. In this past year, I lost a patient to aggressive pancreatic cancer, uh, and I had another patient uh, who, we're not sure if it's drugs, passed away due to drugs. So, it cuts both ways. Yes, our average weight loss in our practice is 15%, right? Our average A1C reduction while stopping meds is 1%, which is like an A1C of 7 to 6 while stopping medications. That's like, which is amazing. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot. Um, the average triglyceride reduction is 40 points, right? In our practice, which is, I don't know if you have us, if you use millimolars in Australia, but in America, 40 milligrams per deciliter, it's a lot. So, we calculated the 10-year cardiovascular risk, and we're reducing risk about 40%. So, bottom line is, yeah, we're doing amazing work, but at the end of the day, it's still a medical practice, and we have to help people through those setbacks as well. Uh, the depression, get them mental health help, anxiety, stress in life, stress in work, that for all of us causes a reversion back to sort of old ways of living and thinking. Um, so you have to be there, be a gentle hand, to pick them up, and not shame them and guilt them into just wanting to not show up again. Uh, so there's a lot. It's a lot of it. It's a lot,
Mm.
and it's not easy for most doctors. Like, we're looking to hire a doctor right now, and I'm struggling to find one, because I don't think, like, I don't have the luxury to wait 5 years for somebody to learn all this. Like, I need them to know it right now.
Speaking of doctors, my first interaction with you was on Twitter or X, and one of the things that kind of shocked me going onto Twitter for the first time was my opinion of a lot of medical professionals, and I don't include you in what I'm about to say, but a lot of medical professionals kind of changed a little bit when I went onto Twitter. I'd always kind of revered someone who was a doctor, right? Like I'd always I when I was young, I had a stroke and a hemorrhagic stroke, and I had brain surgery, and I put my trust in doctors implicitly, right? And
That's funny. We're like opposites. I grew up thinking,
yeah.
like, who the f- is Dr. Adis, and why did he make me wait 2 hours in a waiting room?
Well, yeah, so it kind of flipped completely when I went onto Twitter because it was like almost like a lot of these doctors acting like mean girls.
People who are just half-brained, and can't really fully critically think, can't understand, and think they know best, and so they treat other people like they know best, and they're just they're just terrible humans right now. Will they ever change? Maybe. Who knows? But they're really terrible humans, and most of medicine is like that. I had a patient who had a slightly high LDL and he's a commercial truck driver, and he had a very tiny bit of calcium, and I'm like, look, just go get a stress test. Let's start with a stress test, right? A tiny bit of calcium on his calcium scan. He's nearing 60, and I said, there's going to be no harm. Let's do an ultrasound of your carotid. Let's see what's there. Let's do a stress test. Uh, and he goes to do a stress test, and I'm like, just make sure you do a regular EKG stress test. His EKG had nothing wrong with it. He gets there, and of course, the cardiologist is like, because of paper, is like, you need a nuclear stress test. And this guy was like, I'm not doing a nuclear stress test. Just get me a regular old stress test, put me on a treadmill, put some wires on me, and let's go. I exercise every day. I want to just, and he had some mild sort of symptoms and nothing crazy that I was concerned about, but I was like, just get the stress test and let's just be certain the heart's okay. And the cardiologist like, I'm going to report your license if you don't get my nuclear stress test. I'm going to report you. He's got a commercial driving license. I'm going to report you if you don't do the stress test. And this is the type of, and this is like, and I called the office. I'm like, who are you to say that, to do that? You know, like there's no reason why he can't get a regular old EKG stress test, but he gets paid 6 times as much to put nuclear material in somebody. And he's like, who are you? You're just the primary doctor, you know? So I mean, I've had doctors tell me you inappropriately reversed fatty liver. So you reversed somebody's fatty liver and prediabetes, but I inappropriately did it because it included cheese, right? She didn't want cheese in the diet. This was an endocrinologist. I mean, like, so am I surprised? No. These people are authoritarian nutcases. I mean, look at the last 4 years, you know?
It really does sound like it maybe started the doctor that wanted to give the nuclear test. It started with them going, "Oh, there's a bit extra money in here for me," but at the end of the day, it becomes about ego.
Um, Maybe they even think that their paternalism is helping. Maybe they're so deranged that they think like his ego is what will save the patient, right? So I'm not discounting their psychological nightmare, right? Um, what they have to deal with internally, and how they legitimize their actions. Um, I suspect that's what he thinks. I suspect he thinks that his wisdom is it's a win-win scenario, and he should socially pressure this person, on a subconscious level, I bet, you know. Um, I mean, I can't make sense. It was a guy's a nutcase to me. If I was in, I would have had to hold. It's like if that was my family member and I was there, it would have been ugly. You know, it would have been ugly. I mean, it was ugly for him after the fact. It just was like, I'm never sending you another patient again. I'm going to have this patient see another cardiologist, and I may report you to the state. You know, that's how it ended. I didn't report him to the state because, you know, I'm not like that. But
Wow. So, do you think that do you think it's moving in a direction where things are going to get better in the short to medium term as far as
I'm
people are getting
scared.
healthier?
Nah, no, I'm scared. I'm scared that people's hesitancy towards doctors and their behavior and public health in general, that it's going to edge into sort of a bit of healthcare anarchy and nihilism, which is not needed, not necessarily needed. I think the pendulum's going to swing too far the other way. I already see it in the doctors that have been most viciously uh, uh, attacked by the bullies that you mentioned, right? Um, so I'm worried about that because I don't think all needs to be lost. Just much of it needs to be lost. And in terms of people's health, like whether you take a vaccine that has pretty shitty efficacy and is novel, or whether you take a you know anti-parasitic agent that's also novel and shitty efficacy. I'm looking at it like two sides of the same coin. So, it's like, okay, just like, so I'll step back. Before we got on, I talked about how I felt like I was a middle child. Often I feel like I'm a middle child, uh, where I wish the doctors would just focus on the patients and what it is they need instead of instead of just dealing with all these distractions that take away from a huge looming nightmare, which is all the stats I mentioned. 90% are metabolically unwell, 70% are overweight or obese, 60% are pre-diabetic or diabetic, 50% have some sort of hypertension, and 40% of the people out there will get cancer in their lifetime. Guys, wake the up. Join the SMHP, the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, and let's go.
So, Dr. Tro, how can people get in contact with you? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, any social media, sign up for our newsletter, get the Toward Health app. The website is toward.health or drtro.com, spelled out doctortro.com. Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, everywhere is pretty much the same. Uh, but the app is where I want to spend more and more of my time. Uh, that's where you can get a sleep study anywhere in the United States right through the app. You can get a CGM anywhere in the United States right through the app. You can get an ambulatory blood pressure monitor right there through the app. We're trying to make it. We have courses, free courses that you can take right in the app, so you don't have to pay anything. You can get it for free. So it costs me money. So if you don't like me, you can still get the app, and you know that I'll be harmed. Uh, but the idea is to create a community. There was a place where people used to be able to go to in the metabolic health space, but that they've failed their mission. So we're trying to fill that void. People used to be able to go to another doctor that focused on diets, uh, but that's not a reliable source anymore. So you know, so I'm trying to make a freemium environment for people who need help. So yeah, any one of those places.
Sure. I'll link to all those in the show notes. Dr. Tro, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience with us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.